So obviously this is the first of the series of the line of duty presentations and that Chief Schaefer's put together, or has asked everybody to kind of put together from that standpoint. So I picked one that's a little bit more current. Happened here obviously on April 30th of 2016. It is not local by any means, but I did have the opportunity to speak to some people that were on this particular run, so I have a little bit of insight in regards to it. Anybody have any recollections of any line of duties in that time frame? Probably not, right? So 8500 Pineville Matthews Road in Charlotte, North Carolina. On that evening, some crews and that responded to a working fire in the Edwin Watts Golf Store. The fire department in that the individual in that worked for, or was a part of, was a volunteer fire department. From that standpoint, what does that mean to us? Absolutely nothing, right? Still a firefighter. We talk about professional firefighters and everything else. I have very high regards for volunteers from that standpoint, as they do it without pay, whereas we're paid to be here from that standpoint. What it does do, though, is it kind of gives us an idea of what their staffing levels are and how that changes from what we have on that standpoint. So they have 50 members. 28 of them are trained as interior firefighters, and we'll go a little bit deeper into what their criteria is for that. They do have paid coverage between 0700 in the morning and 16 or 1800 at night, so 7 o'clock to 6 o'clock. There is no paid coverage from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. They do open up again at 9 o'clock at night until 6 o'clock in the morning with some overtime shifts. Guys can come in, they can work during that time frame. Any ideas why they have that breakdown on times? Family time, getting home from work, dinner. The other side is, I'm guessing, is based on their run statistics. Again, you know, if we look at our statistics in that, we typically kind of fall in that same realm. During the daytime or afternoon, it's a little bit heavier. There's a little bit of a lull, although most would say not, because obviously every time we sit down for dinner, we end up going out somewhere, but picks up again in that overnight time frame for that. So each day there are 4 firefighter EMTs that are paid to be there between that 0700 and 1800 time frame. There's one that's there at 07 to 1600. 2 of them are from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock. And then one will be from 9 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the evening. So again, from 8 to 5 is when they have 4 people on staff. Outside of that, they start paring it down a little bit from that point. So the fire department in question, so I've used numbers just to understand in a NIOSH report. So if you ever read a NIOSH report, they will not use department names or there again to either protect the innocent or charge the guilty. So it's just listed as Department 7. When we refer to Department 7, that's going to be that Pineville Morrow department from that standpoint. So their department, they have 3 engines, 1 ladder truck, 1 brush truck, a heavy rescue, a light duty rescue or squad, and then a chief's car from that point. They do not run all of those at any given point. Again, there's 4 people on, so what they do is they have a rotation for their engines. Their engines will always be first out. That's what they're going to staff their 4 people in that on. On certain days, so Mondays and Thursdays, they roll engine 1. On Tuesdays and Fridays, they roll engine 2. On Wednesdays and whatever, they roll a different engine. That way it keeps the mileage about the same on all of them. Maintenance and everything else allows that. Again, 105-foot tower ladder. They do have automatic aid agreements with several other surrounding agencies. That's the volunteer side as well. So the volunteer side seem to work real well together. They have aid available on request from the Charlotte Fire Department. So they actually share a border with Charlotte from that standpoint. But the big key factor is it's upon request. it's not set up as automatic aid. And that's one of those things, obviously, is where we've worked ourselves through of having that automatic aid already coming and set into place. They do about 3,000 calls a year. As we mentioned before, North Carolina has no minimum requirements to be an interior firefighter. What are our requirements to be an interior structural firefighter? 24 hours, right? Wow, that's impressive. This department in that does, so they're proactive as it comes to the state. They require 36 hours of training for their individuals before they're cleared to be an interior firefighter from that point. They do strive to have all interior firefighters trained to the firefighter 1 and 2 level. It's at equivalent to the NFPA 101 or 1001. They don't have any officer development, formal officer development training programs. Basically, if you've been an active member for 3 years, that puts you in place and makes you qualified in their eyes to be a lieutenant or a captain at that point. All the lieutenants and captains are appointed positions. So again, it's a typical volunteer department from that standpoint. If anybody's been around them, that's the way it works. Individual in that passed away, Richard Sheltra. Again, fairly young individual, so he was a member for less than 3 years. He was the rookie of the year in his first year, obviously from that standpoint, but in 2014 he had 127 documented hours of training. 2015, 198 documented hours. In 2016, up until April 30th, he had documented 23 and a half hours. When we look at those training records, we look at what was accomplished and what was worked on, these are the things that were listed in that. Apparatus familiarization, truck tools, building construction, SCBA usage, PPE, and then your firefighter 1 and 2. So again, understanding the level of training. Most of this stuff is coming on his own. Some of these things are coming from the officers and that are there that are trying to help him. What do all these things play into? What's he trying to accomplish? Trying to get his ass inside to be able to fight fire and have fun, right? So firefighter 1 and 2, they say that. SCBA use. How many times have we documented training of SCBA use? What does that mean? Well, I changed my bottle, I put batteries in it, I know how the heads-up display works, all those type things. It's not necessarily familiarization with your SCBA, it's not air management, it's not the emergency procedures and that they go along with those. He was also certified through IFSAC, through Emergency Vehicle Driver Operator, Hazmat Level 1, which is essentially the awareness level for us, and Firefighter 1 and 2. So when we look at this here, of having the certification of Driver Operator, what do those two things probably attend to? Him wanting to be able to drive, right? So again, understanding and trying to put it in perspective of what was actually being trained on, what was the knowledge base, and that obtained by the individual. Engine 3 lieutenant. So the lieutenant, this particular lieutenant was a backstepper in that with Sheltra that night on Engine 3 for Department 7. He did have 5 years on the volunteer department. He was also a career firefighter with the Charlotte Fire Department. He was working in one of the overtime shifts in that overnight from 9 o'clock until 6 o'clock. The captain on the engine, so Engine 3 again, he was the senior captain. So the senior captain is the officer of the rig. That's the way that they had their stuff set up. He had 29 years worth of service at the volunteer fire department from that point. Car 7, or the chief of the department, he was the incident commander on this evening. His 27 years with the volunteer department, 2 years as the chief of the department at that point. He also is a current captain with 15 years of experience on Charlotte's department. I don't know what rigs he worked on or anything along those lines. They didn't have that info. When we look at this particular fire and this incident, the response from the volunteer department was an engine, a ladder, the squad, and the chief, and that responded as the incident commander. They did have 5 personnel that responded to the scene in their own personal vehicles. Again, we can see here there were 6 people on the engine that evening. The driver and the senior captain, obviously the 2 positions you would think of. The 2 lieutenants and the 2 firefighters in the back, which Mr. Sheltra, and that was one of the firefighters on the back step. Ladder 1 responded in later into the incident. The assistant chief responded back, got another individual that happened to be on the station, and they responded with 2 on their particular ladder. Automatic aid, so engine 3 from department 2, a neighboring department, responded with 2 individuals on that engine from that point. The firefighter, once they got there, married up with the second due engine from, or the second group of members from engine 3 on department 7 on the secondary hose line. We'll hear a little bit more about that in a minute. The requested aid, again, this had to be requested. This is not automatic, this is not set up. Ladder 24 happened to be in the, or on the street on an EMS call at the time. Chief 7 heard that, was able to understand that they were in the general area, and he actually special called them before anything else. Once they arrived on scene, they requested a full first alarm assignment from Charlotte, which got them 4 engines, 1 ladder, a rescue, and then a battalion. And that's the staffing levels. Their rescues, they didn't have their numbers listed there, but they run their rescues with 5 to 6. And again, full-time staff pieces of equipment. So this is just an overview as we talk about their area. Fire was located here. This is Department 7, or the Pineville Memorial Station. And in the nearest Charlotte Fire Department, there on that side. Again, where Ladder 24 was coming out of. Once they arrived, they were assigned to roof operations. So this is the structure, or the building involved. So this building was built in 1978, 70,000 square foot strip mall facility. The building that was on fire, you'll notice, or you'll know here, labeled in red. I don't have a time. So this picture here was actually taken in 2015, aerial view of it in 2015. Stop. So this was the building or the structure that we looked at overview in June of 2009. As you can see, parapet walls on the front. The Edwin Watts Golf Store, I'll be pulling on your expertise here in a little bit. The Edwin Watts Golf Store, which was involved in this incident, you can see here was still in that location at the time. It pretty much was in business up until after the fire, just FYI. This was, this was the same building in March of 2016. So, we have any of these structures that have changed dramatically? Absolutely, right? So what's the behind the facades of all of that? Still the same shit, right? Different areas and everything, and we're going to go through the construction a little bit here in a minute, but understand, I mean, as you can see, in 7 years, there was a pretty dramatic change to that. What was all down here in this area? Fitness center, right? So again, probably wide open, based upon that standpoint. Now there's 2 separate stores within there. So again, how were those divided? What were the systems? What were the mechanicals and everything else involved there? So again, the Edwin Watts Golf Store. This is what it looked like pretty much on the evening, or that day. Strip mall structure, same thing that we have here. I've got the dimensions in a minute. Full glass front facade with the door in the center of the building, right underneath the big golf words in the middle of the screen. So again, 7,000, just over 7,000 square feet of retail space. It's 50 foot wide, 140 feet, 9 inches deep. Alpha side was all plate glass with the center doorway. The door behind the plate glass door was secured with a metal security gate. Bravo side and Delta side were 12 foot tall concrete block firewalls. For it to be a firewall, what does that mean? When we talk about building construction. So it's actually, technically, it's got to be 3 feet above the deck to be a true firewall from it. So I don't know, it's hard to tell from the exterior views from top. There are divisions that you can see from the roof, but understand that, yes, it does extend the full length of that building and go from there. It's Charlie side, concrete block with closed fire door. This was intended and always had been used just as an employee entrance only. So what do we know about Charlie side doors on these type structures?
Well, they usually have extra security.
Yeah, usually some kind of extra fortification. It's not a normal in and out kind of fashion in that. Flat roof, metal deck covered with 3 layers of asphalt foam and waterproof membrane, which was then covered with asphalt and gravel. So again, your typical, we were all up on the roof at Avon Sports Apparel, pretty much that same concept of what was there. Again, it built in the 70s, 60s. That building I think was even a little bit earlier than that, when it used to be, what, the drugstore? Is that what it was?
Dollars.
No. So, and then no sprinkler system. Again, these are things that have been changed in the time frames and years. Do we still have strip malls with no sprinklers in them? Absolutely, right? Most of them.
That's kind of why they go strip malls, so they're within the footprint where they don't have to sprinkle it.
Weather this evening, 64 degrees, 93% humidity. Winds were west out of northwest at 6. Overcast with rain and thunderstorms in the area. Weather records and police department interviews witnessed, obviously there were some heavy thunderstorms, rains and lightning and loud thunder in the immediate area. As we talk about this and as we get through it, it was determined it was, well, about 99% certainty that it was caused by a lightning strike. Came in on the back Bravo Charlie corner, made its way down the back wall, and then got into the structure from there. Just a quick timeline before we get into the meat and taters of it. So 2100 hours, 2103, the police responded for a security alarm activation. They found smoke in the retail golf, or the store, notified dispatch. 3 minutes later, Department 7 and then Department 2 were dispatched for a commercial structure fire. Again, going to get them 1 engine from each of those locations, a chief car, and then throughout time, they'll get an additional ladder, 5 members that respond from home, a squad, and what was the other, light rescue, I believe. 2108, the chief arrives on scene, drives around the structure, reports nothing showing. So what's that telling us right off the get-go?
Discrepancy.
Discrepancy, right? So if we're getting reports that there's smoke in the building, now we're not seeing that, what are we missing? Maybe the cops just had powdered sugar in their eyes, it's hard to say. So again, we're going to take it for a grain of salt. 2110, engine 7, or Department 7, engine 3 arrives on the scene. That same time frame, they're gonna enforce entry through the front door, and they're stretching their 1.75" pre-connect into the golf store. 1.75", 200-foot leg, really the same setup in that we have here from that perspective. 21:35, 25 minutes later, there's a mayday called by Engine 20. Engine 20 is one of the Charlotte rigs. They ended up getting there. Engine 20 actually was stretching the third line into the building when they called this mayday. 21:43, the downed firefighter, the mayday firefighter, was removed from the building. 21:45, so 2 minutes later, they were en route to the hospital. Kudos to their medical crew. Again, that's going to be that's pretty dang quick. 2200, they arrive at the hospital. 22 minutes later, he's pronounced dead. So again, we were on scene at 20:08 in an hour and 14 minutes. We've got a firefighter in that's deceased. This is a audio tape of radio traffic. Understand this is condensed. This is not actual time. If it was, obviously we'd be sitting here for an hour and a long time, but this is going to be instant command, the initial dispatch. We'll just kind of listen to it real quick and then move on.
Central time, North Carolina, response for structure fire.
As I mentioned before, this is North Carolina, so probably you can translate a little bit.
Matthews Road. Police are on scene, advise heavy smoke visible from the Edmond golf store. Time out 2104. Thank County Fire. Engine 3 en route. Charlie. Multiple guys are out. About 9 store. Police are on scene, advise heavy smoke is visible. Sure. Closest hydrant's going to be across the street in your section of Blue Marion Drive and Papa Matthews Road. Go ahead.
10-4, your interior. Command all companies, final engine 3 is advanced station 3/4 to the front door. Command the second, we're going to upgrade this to a working fire.
Central Calgary Working Fire, 2110.
Your suppression. Command Carolina. I want you to use an Nakano entrance back down here to engine 3. I want you to lay away towards Kettering Drive past Bailey.
10-4, Carolina Engine 3, reversing out.
Go up the ladder. Yeah, 10-4, Billy, I was just getting ready to call you. Give me the ladder. Command the Central 1100 series to this location.
Do you have a K-12 saw that truck? 10-4. 10-4, bring it to the front door. 10-4.
Carolina, you're not getting through here. You're not going to make it through here. Cut down the alleyway and come back around to the front over here. Take a right on that alleyway by that white car. Yeah, ladder 24, the 8th side here, left of the building.
Ladder 24, ladder building.
Carolina, brush 6 en route. Ladder 24, drop your K-12 at the 8th side there too. They got some security bars they got to get through.
Ladder 24, copies, K-12.
Command the final 10. I see you pulling that second line. Let's not short that second line until we get that line laid.
There's somebody out here.
Ladder 24 is working on it. Command ladder 24, top side ventilation. Alright, command the central update. Crews are making an interior attack, engine 3/4 to the front door. Carolina's laying a line to Kettering Drive. Ladder 24 is top side ventilation. All hands are working.
Command, just so you're aware, it sounds like you got a working fire in 3023's area.
Give two shits, right?
SQ3, structure fire, 7348 Oakwood Lane. On scene, Charlie. SQ3, structure fire, 7348 Oakwood Lane. On scene, Charlie.
So who can tell me another incident where dispatch came in and talked about additional information that wasn't pertinent, where we had a line of duty death? Here in Indiana.
Was it
Muncie firefighter at the church,
Scott
right?
Davis? Scott.
So they got on, first they got on the radio, they were having trouble finding keys for a tanker. they'll get started, maybe start something else, so on and so forth, long dissertation. Then they get on the radio and tell them that the neighbor behind the house has a pond, you're welcome to use it, take whatever you want, and all this, and it wasn't 36 seconds, I think it was, 34, 36 seconds later, they're calling a mayday with structural collapse and a firefighter trap. I mean, it's interesting, but.
Engines 26, 15, and 39, mutual aid response, 8505 Mill Matthews Road. Unaged, hotel. Engines 26, 16, and 39, mutual aid response, 8505 Mill Matthews Road. Unaged, hotel.
Engine 3 to command, I do not have a water supply. Yeah, you do now.
Get them to push the ceiling, it's kind of dry ceiling in here, they're gonna need to push it.
Okay, 10-4, command ventilation. There's gotta be some kind of ceiling, that's why you're not getting any lift. If you need to push through there, I've got 26 here with me, I can send them up there if that'll help you. Command ladder 24.
Go ahead, command.
Agent 26 is coming up there too, you're the big group leader.
The president is allowed.
Go ahead.
Shelter did not make it out of the building yet, he's coming out, he got lost, make sure he gets out of the building.
Okay, 10-4. Command alarm, give me a third alarm, please.
Whenever the back door opens up, so we have reference to the interior.
10-4, Agent 39, where are you standing on that Charlie door? I got it open. Okay, 10-4. Go direct with operations, let them know you got that back door open.
39 operations, we got the back door is open. Alright, Dick, you guys, Jennifer, you can find it here, I need a thermal camera here quick.
Commander 39,
Go ahead, man.
you're not committed now, correct?
Yeah, we just got the rear door open.
Okay, 10-4, primary. We also have paint water supply.
So,
Operations to command.
Command, go ahead.
I'm in the showroom. Get a company to come find him.
Yeah, Bill.
I'm in the showroom, I'm here to find him. Get a company to come find him.
Command, go ahead.
I'm in the showroom. Get a company to come find him.
Turn around, lost in the showroom, have a company come find me.
I'm in the showroom, I'm here to find him.
Okay, 10-4. Command 239.
I need more who's pushed in.
Okay, 10-4. Engine 16's driver is advising that that's not a pass device, it's a fire alarm. Can you confirm that?
Pass device on air pack, ready? I know what's wrong with him, we're backing up now.
Okay, 10-4, you have the down firefighter, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, 10-4. Commander Medic, did you talk to the mayday?
job in a mayday. Central units operating, structure fire, 8500 Common Matthews Road. All units not involved in the mayday, switch your traffic to OPS 8. All units not involved in the mayday, switch your traffic to OPS 8. OPS 6 is now your mayday channel. Fire alarm is dropping the patch with 6, moving into fire ground operations are going to be on 8. The patch is moving to 8. This is the mayday channel.
Come up in front of the building behind exit 24, bring me your top. Enter from the AutoZone side.
Tell them how this patch of OPS 6 has been broken. That OPS 6 is a mayday channel. Hey, now to operate the advised, we're gonna come around to the A division to start your primary. We can't get through to the Charlie division.
Okay, 10-4.
Yeah, 10-4, we're running out of firemen, I got other alarms coming, command engine 2. 15 to command, that's Chris, you're coming back in. Sorry, say that again? I'll call them around, coming back in. Engine 2, CFE engine 2. Engine 2, go ahead, command. Any signs of the battalion car, get ready to go to work. Copy that, you're signing up for the battalion car? So just meet me at the battalion car, get ready to go to work. Copy that. Command alarm, who's my next due ladder company? Command, you got a ladder 16 en route C. Okay, good. Well, Command ladder 16, I want you to enter at the Nakano entrance. Go past all this, and I see you coming up. Take a right there, ladder 16. I want you to set up on the A side. We're gonna get you the ladder to the roof as well. Go ahead, I'm on the end of the line. Press the single hand. Go ahead. Yes, sir, I'm following the line back in. I'm with Chris fighting the fire right now. Chief Griffith's still in here. Should be. Command operations.
What do we take away from that? So what do you think of the incident commander?
I couldn't really tell the difference between him and who operations was. Seemed kind of confusing there.
So there again, operations ended up becoming, so that was the battalion that came in from CFD. He took over operations and made some tactical decisions that changed the direction in that fire. Obviously for the good, we'll get into that here in a minute. One thing with it, so had a mayday, had a firefighter transported off the scene. He still remained pretty level, surprisingly. I mean, there again, I could just, I don't want to imagine, but you know, you could sit there and put yourself in that spot and still thinking other things. Now there again, I think he had some people around him that were obviously helping with that. So who here on this scene was not involved in the mayday? Was there any crews not involved with the mayday?
The incoming units.
The incoming units.
I think the one on the Charlie side.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm getting at is, so we gotta change radio channels. Everybody not involved in the mayday, go to a different channel. Who's involved in the mayday? Who's not involved in the mayday? Again, that's one of my big things, and I just, I got a hard time with it. How much confusion, how much traffic then came across still on Op 6 when they were supposed to be on Ops 8? We start missing other pertinent critical information in that may be having to go out in a time-sensitive area from there too. Again, wanted to kind of listen to that to get a rundown, and we'll go through the event here a little bit. So, what happened, right? So that's what we're here to kind of digest and think about. So again, we had initial reports of heavy smoke within the structure from a cop. Is that a reliable source?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, they're going to give us some pretty decent information. Now, is it truly heavy smoke in our eyes, or is it light smoke? I give two shits less, right? There's smoke in that structure. I'm pretty confident that they can tell me that from that standpoint. So Engine 3 from Pineville Morrow shows up on scene. They get assigned to stretch their line through the front door. They go to the front door, force entry through the glass door, and are met by a security door. Do they have the tools and equipment to be able to handle that?
No, they had to ask for.
Didn't sound like it, right?
Yeah,
Needing a saw. So, conversely though, they asked for the saw, they were able to gain entry before the saw even got there. So traditional forcible entry methods did work. There's a picture of the security gate. So again, a deadbolt with a slide block, and that here Halligan bar, you can get in there, get it forced, and get it through. What's another thing that we noticed about this picture? So this is a building that had heavy smoke. What did the engine crew report about the ceiling?
Drop cylinders.
So what do we notice about the ceiling here?
Looks pretty clean.
How about you can see it? There's not a single panel dropped out of that ceiling. Again, right, when we go through the door, we've got to be forcing our way through it. If nothing else, take your hose string from here and drive it down that lane and knock them out of there. Again, we've got to see that stuff. They had reports, fire above the ceiling, but not through the roof at that point in time. When they got to the front door, they started looking back in. So again, engine 3, working on the door. The lieutenant goes in a little ways, checks with his thermal imaging camera. In the Bravo Charlie corner, they can see a glow of where the fire in that is. It's breached down through the drop ceiling, but not overly big, right? So what size line did they take? What size line is this fire? Until proven otherwise, right? So again, just understanding, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get there, but residential tactics on commercial fires are not going to cut it. We may get lucky, we may get ahead of it every so often, but we may end up with situations that are bad from that point. The lieutenant goes in, he takes his thermal, gets in there a little ways, comes back out, grabs the crew, and they proceed to get through the structure. Frog, how's this building laid out? Typical.
Center aisle, we got some small aisles off either side.
Yeah. So you can see it here, you get a decent layout, so you got your countertop here where they probably do all their stuff. Merchandise down this side, clothing. On the Bravos, on the Charlie side, they have all their golf storage in that, so it's all set up. I've got some more pictures that we'll take a peek at from there. So again, getting from point A to point B, how taxing is that going to be for 3 guys on a hose line? Even with an 1 3/4. It's going to be pretty taxing, right? So these guys work their ass off, they get their line back there, they get back to where the fire is. They get about 20 feet within the structure. They've got heavy, thick, brownish, light brown smoke, right? So again, hard to say exactly what it is. Is it contents burning? Are we getting into structure? It's not black, but it's thick enough. Light to moderate heat conditions, right? Well, what else could that mean?
Hidden fire.
Yeah, it's trapped up in that ceiling, right? Again, remembering, we've got to open that space up to where we can see over it, or see above our heads from that standpoint. What's the primary mission on this fire? So we have a fire in a strip mall like this. What's the primary mission? Getting water on the fire, right? So engine crews and that, as we're going through, we've got to commit every bit of crew that we have until we get water on that fire. I care less about the second line, I care less about the third line until we have water back there on that fire at that point in time. First engine takes the 1 3/4 to the back. Second engine, which is the second part of engine 3, starts pulling another secondary line in that off of it, right? What side do they pull? Another 1 3/4, right? That's what we do. We got 2 of them on the truck. We're pulling 1 3/4 as we go in. So we work our way in. We go from there. Where's the third new engine go? So we've still not made the seat of the fire.
The third line, the front door, 1 3/4.
So he sends him around to the back to start opening up the back of the structure.
Yeah, it's engine.
Not saying it's a horrible call. Again, getting some egress in that off of the backside. You don't have a truck crew available to get it done. Ladder 24 is going to the roof to get that opened up and get a report up there. So it ends up being, I think, 4 engines later that we finally get additional hands on the hand lines of getting stuff in there. Again, and they were assist, so that was engine 16. So engine 39 goes to the back. Engine 26 goes with ladder 24 to the roof. Engine 16 gets told, hey, get on that 1 3/4 and assist them getting it back in there. CFD chief shows up, takes over operations, bypasses the 1 3/4, grabs a 2.5, and engine 20 starts stretching a 2.5 in. Long story short, the first new engine works their way all the way to the back. the guy on the nozzle gets to the back of the structure and he starts running low on air, right? How deep was this building?
140, right?
Yeah, 140 some odd feet, 150 feet we'll call it to be, on even numbers. It's a long ways to go, and a short time to get there, right? So, if I knew if we were heading eastbound, it would have been even better. But so they get back there, the nozzle guy and that starts running low on air. So he lets the lieutenant and that know, hey, I'm running low on air, live alert's going off, I gotta get out. What should that be a red flag to the officers about?
Everybody else.
Everybody else is there, right? So again, this is why we do those drills and trainings and stuff when we do the air consumptions. We've been out here and done the WPE as a group. Those are building those baselines and that of understanding. Maybe you got that one guy that will suck down the bottle. And again, your nozzle guy is going to be working a little bit harder. But as soon as someone else takes over that position, they're going to be working, and we got to be thinking of it from there. So they get in there. Sheltra ends up moving up to the nozzle position. So he's second guy on the nozzle. What happens to his air supply? He starts going off, right? Oh crap, I'm running out of air. So you got a kid who's been on the job for less than 3 years, has not been to any form of air survival or air management training or anything along those lines. We see it all the time. I see it all the time. What's the first reaction as soon as that viper alert goes off or your bell starts going off? It's the first thought. I'm out of air. I'm out of air. We're not out of air. We have to maintain composure. We have to maintain our sense of confidence and ability. But it is a situation, right? How many times have we sent a member out by themselves in that because they were low on air? I'm not going to say it's too many, but we have to understand the personnel in that's doing it. So if I told you that Sheltra told them that they were leaving the structure and okay, so he's following the hose line out, where does he end up at? Back at the nozzle with the officer again. Hey, I'm low on air, I got to get out of here. They spent minutes, and I repeat minutes, trying to calm him down and get his composure to get him back out. They follow the line again back out of the building. How many times do you think he was put on the hose line to go out of the structure?
2 or 3.
4.
And
4 times, separate times, he was put on a hose line by individuals.
And no one stayed with him after
Nobody
they
stayed
figured-
with them. So, again, thinking of these things. Send a guy, he ends up coming back to the nozzle. Now I know I've got a situation. We've got to start working our way or physically putting somebody with that individual. We had a situation last year, and I'll just use personal experience out at McCormick's place. An individual was low on air. What the situation was, I can't tell you, but as he come through the smoke, I could hear that he was no longer breathing air. He had unclicked his regulator, was down on the floor doing the things that you should be doing from that standpoint, but he passed 4 different crews from the stairwell to the area that I was sitting at, and everybody just kept, hey, it's behind us, hey, it's behind us, hey, it's behind us. Nobody ever grabbed them and directed them out of the structure. Again, we have to be cognizant of that stuff. As people's mentation and that goes down, we start getting fight or flight, we start getting the anxiety levels and everything else. Are we making rational decisions? Absolutely not. And we've got to take that into play as we move forward. So again, so the lieutenant and that, finally, all right, let's get out of here. His low air alarm goes off. So now they got another crew up there, right? So when you get your first guy that goes low on air, what should be another thought in your head as that officer?
Could replace the whole crew.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? Hey chief, we're going to need a crew in here. We got members. I got members in that starting to go low. Let's get another crew up here so we can brief them on what's going on and we get ourselves out from that standpoint. So a lot of that stuff didn't happen. So the lieutenant finally grabs hold of him because again, he's made his way back to the nozzle again after they were supposed to be out. They start heading out. They get separated. So I mentioned the lieutenant at the beginning of the time frame, gave his experience, gave his knowledge from that, or his time on the job and things from there. That lieutenant, on the way to the scene, ends up dropping his radio in the back of the truck. He reaches under the seat trying to find it, trying to get it. They don't have radio straps. They keep them in their pocket or whatever the situation is. He can't find it, right? So get on the scene. What's he going to do? Well, I'll just look real quick. I'll grab it. Well, shit's hitting the fan. We're going to get our stuff. So again, didn't have a radio with him to be able to make some of these communications and that on top of it, right? What do we talk about all the time in regards to catastrophic events?
Small things just snowball.
It just starts adding up. It starts ticking and growing. And here are those avenues in that we can see that stuff. You got guys without radios. You got guys without knowledge of air management. We have unknown structures. We have not checking overheads, wrong size lines, all kinds of stuff in that, and it starts going downhill quickly. So again, so they're working their way out. They become separated. He ends up losing. He's on the line. Shelter peels off somewheres and he's not sure where he is. He ends up, so the lieutenant Ned ends up coming up the Charlie side, ends up getting hung up in some of the golf clubs and the displays and that from that point. And these are some of the conditions and stuff that they were encountering. Again, not a horrible condition. Standing on the outside of that building, you wouldn't, this is still a fightable fire. This is still things that are going well. As you can tell, they've already, so this is a picture further in. You got your 2 3/4 coming off, and now you have your 2 1/2 and that coming as well. So this is a little bit later in the incident. So this is that Charlie side of that structure. Sorry, the Bravo, I've said that backwards. Bravo side. So there's your front door, your Bravo side of the structure coming in. The lieutenant gets hung up in this area. Gets himself untangled, regains his composure and everything else. Here we can see a hose line snaking through. Any idea what this is? Picture's a little fuzzy. So this is the lieutenant's helmet, and this is the mask. So I will say the lieutenant survived because, and he accounts this to that, North Carolina has a breathing school. Very good school. If you ever get a chance to go, I highly recommend it. But it's a air management training based on another line of duty death, or developed after that. He attributes that training to him still being alive here today. Again, when he ran out of air, shoved his face on the floor like he's supposed to do, gone down and did what he wanted. Sheltra, without that experience, takes his stuff off and is walking around the structure lost. Again, are we going to be able to maintain orientation better if we're on the ground or if we're walking around aimlessly and blind? Yeah, absolutely, if we can get down into an area. So again, he works his way through, he gets his way out. On the tape, you hear that. Shelter has not made it out. He's supposed to be coming, let us know if he gets there. That's the officer, the senior captain in that, trying to relay. Again, he had been to the nozzle, they sent him away. Had come back to the nozzle, the lieutenant went with him, the lieutenant made it outside. Hey, he's still not with me, he's still within that structure. Engine 16, stretching, working on that 1 3/4 coming in. Engine 20 is stretching the 2 1/2 coming in afterwards. Engine 20 finds Shelter at that point. That's when the Mayday is called. So again, when is it a Mayday situation?
Before that,
Long before that, right? But what hindered that?
no radio.
Didn't have a radio with them. So, again, is that under 3-year guy probably going to think about that at that point? What was he concerned with? I'm breathing shitty stuff and I can't breathe, right? Everything else goes out of his mind, right? As we talk about all the time, we raise to what level of training? Our lowest, very lowest level of training, right? So, long story short, or short story long, Engine 20 gets in there, finds them, calls the Mayday, drags them out, gets them to the medical. They end up transporting them and moving on from that standpoint. Fire goes on for another hour and 20 minutes or so. Finally, he's brought under control, and all is done, and other than investigations for the next long time. Roof material. So as we talked about, again, anybody that was over at the Avon Sports Apparel, that ought to look real familiar, right? With the exception, I think the ribs on ours were a little bit farther apart. But your foam, asphalt over top with your ballast or gravel from that standpoint. So what created the troubles in that for the crew on the roof getting this opened up?
It's just not an easy thing to get through. There's
Not an easy thing to get through. What did they get asked to leave at the front door?
the K-12.
K-12.
Yeah. What'd they have on the roof to be able to cut with?
Chainsaw probably.
Chainsaw with a carbide tip blade, right? Cutter's edge with a bullet chain. Is it gonna work? Eventually you're gonna cut through a little bit of stuff, but it's not the design feature of that saw.
Did it gum up quite a bit on them, you know, or?
I don't know about the gumming up so much, I just don't think it cut the metal and
What they
then
need to do.
as efficiently. What does that picture indicate or tell us?
Stuff torn off the roof down the side of the.
Yeah, so this was a roof fire. This was a fire that was in between the roofing materials and that, again, as I said, lightning strike, that went, again, low to moderate heat on the inside. We never really got the fire down below, right? It's burning above, creating the smoke, creating the conditions in that. Did extend, what's the exterior structure of this building? Block. So what's in there that's gonna burn? Not a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah, just can't hold the heat though.
Unfortunately, we got a guy that didn't go home off of this. Right? So. Richard Sheltra, 20 years old. Good kid. Again, talked to several guys in that knew him. Was very into the job, really wanted to know this craft. And again, you know, the situation just lends itself to it. A lot of different things that could have been done differently or should have been done differently. So when we look at everything in that, again, I just kind of come across this one, liked it. It doesn't matter until it does. Right? We talk about training, we talk about those things, or reading our buildings and understanding them. How many times have we really focused and concentrated on commercial fires, strip malls from that standpoint? It's difficult. There are places that are hard for us to get in and do tactile stuff, but we can get in there and do a lot of pre-plan type stuff. I haven't been to a building yet, well, maybe a couple of them, but most of them don't have a problem with us going through and walking and that, and those are things that we need to be doing from that standpoint. So what do we take away from this and what do we learn? So again, we look at our PPE, right? Personal protective equipment. How can it protect us? You gotta have it. I mean, that's the long and short of it. You know, the radio in that, he didn't have his radio. That's our lifeline. That's why we make sure everybody in this room and that has the accessibility to it. Am I gonna say that they're always, you know, turned up to where, but they should be always on, right? As long as it's on, you can transmit and get information out. You may not hear it coming back to you, but you can if you're in a bad position. A lot of guys had a habit of always turning it off, right? Well, I'm not the officer, I don't want it to squelch. It's the volume that creates the squelch, not the radio being turned on. So again, click it on, leave it turned all the way down if you're not going to be listening to it or whatever else not. But something bad happens, it pins you to the floor and all you can do is this. You can at least get information out. You can put some information out there. But again, it's got to be on, right? So as we look at our policy, I know that was one of the things in the deal. You know, we've implemented the radio policy and stuff. Wear them in the straps. They go under our coat, keeps them secured, keeps them out of harm's way to the best of our ability from that point. SCBAs. It's more than just turning them on in the morning and making sure the batteries are charged. It's understanding how they work. It's understanding what that means when that bell goes off. It's understanding long beforehand, how long can I truly work before that bell's going to go off? How long do I have once it goes off? Those are all things that we can be doing and we can be learning as we go through our daily operations. We're here for 24 hours a day, most of us 100 days a year. It's not extremely taxing amount of time from that standpoint. So every so often, pull it out, go through it, make sure you know the ins and outs of it, know your emergency procedures. If it malfunctions, what are we going to do? Where's the best air? Where's the best place to get to? What are avenues available to us? What's our building construction tell us? Again, commercial's a little bit different, right? Residential's, how far between windows? Usually not real far, right? If you're in a room, you're probably within 8 feet of a window in most structures. Most of the houses we have here, if you can find a wall, can you get out? Absolutely, right? Anybody dies because you can't get through a piece of vinyl siding, we're going to have bigger issues. So, understand that our PPE is only as good as we're going to make it from that point. Orientation. I didn't mention this. The first officer took in a tick in that with them, right? So they went back, they found the seat of the fire, used the tick to get to where they were. What do you think happened to that tick when they got to the back of the building?
Laid down probably.
So, in the panic of trying to get out and everything else, it got knocked out of the hand and was lost. At one point you hear on the radio traffic, we need another tick in here, ASAP. So again, it's a tool, it's a very good tool, definitely something to be used and understand. What's the other downside to a thermal in that? So again, we talk about the ceilings. Will these cameras see through the acoustical ceiling tiles? Not overly well, right? You're going to get more heat signatures on your grid patterns and things along those lines, but it's not going to be a definite. Anytime there's drop ceiling, we've got to be punching ceiling, without question. I can't say it any plainer than that. If it's an engine crew and it's got smoke conditions like that, use your nozzle if you have to. Take them out, get them opened up so we know what we're walking into. At one point, and I don't remember hearing it on the radio traffic here, but it's in the NIOSH report, the incident commander made certain that everybody knew that they were not taking the glass out of the front of that building. What was that based on?
South Carolina.
Super sofa fire, right?
Which is
That was
good.
in their head.
It's good.
Good thing to think of. Would that have been a beneficial thing in this fire? Could have been.
If they have water on
Again,
fire.
where the fire was, what the conditions were, and things along those lines, it may have lifted the smoke in that out of that structure. You were trying to get it through a man door, which is 36 or 38 inches wide by 80 inches tall. That's a lot of stuff trying to get out through that one opening, whereas we may have been able to create additional. But it's definitely food for thought from there. But understand, thermal imagers, again, are only as good as they're going to be. If we rely on them, they will fail us at the most inopportune time as well, right? Search ropes. So most of our structures, most of our searches in that we go through, do we deploy search ropes? No, right? It's a residential structure, 900 to 2,000 square foot, got individual rooms and everything else that lends ourselves to being oriented from that. Commercial structures are ones that'd be a good idea. Again, knowing what it is that where we're going, a way in and out of that structure, and if nothing else, it's a way for somebody else to get to where we are from that point. And it's things to think about, things to train on, and go from there. What are we searching for in a commercial structure?
Fire.
Fire is the bigger one, right?
Yeah.
So all the time we talk about life safety, obviously is our first priority. Is life safety still our first priority? Absolutely. But whose life safety are we talking about at this point? Ours, right? When we go into a residential structure and that to search, why are we searching harder there for life safety? The probability, the circumstances that are surrounding it, right? So people are typically sleeping, they're typically in an area where they can't get out of it. If people are at a store, what are they, I mean, there are people that go unconscious, but you know, for the most part, people are ambulatory. People are going to go away from the hazards and away from the threats as they pose themselves. Now, is there opportunity that you'll have somebody that gets trapped? Absolutely. Not saying it won't. But we,
Yeah,
what's that?
They use Facebook Live.
Yeah, yeah, film themselves on the way out.
there's a couple of Walmarts that where they.
But they'd still be shopping, but until the smoke got real bad at the registers. So, but understanding what our focus and what our priorities in that are, they do shift, they do change as we're moving along. Again, that search rope, some form of orientation as we move through there. What else do we have as orientation?
Aisles and our aisles.
Yeah, our hose line, right? So again, I know that we've covered this in the past. We've not come back to it in a while. So which way to the exit? Smooth bump bump, right? Everybody knows that. But how easy is that when you're amped up, your anxiety level's going, you're now at a point that your mentation in that's decreased, you're sucking shitty air and everything else, thinking of that stuff. Again, 4 times. 4 times an individual was put on a hose line. Should be a lifeline out of that structure. We just have to understand that's not always the case, right? As I talked about residential tactics at a commercial fire, hose line selection. Why'd they pull 1 3/4 inch?
That's what they pulled the last
That's
time.
what it's from.
That's what we always do, right? We always pull up and pull 1 3/4 inch. The other side to it, maybe the conditions lend it to it, right? And I'm not gonna badmouth it, I'm not gonna bash it, because I wasn't there, and I don't know for 100%. I can make some speculations, I can talk to people in that have some understanding of those areas, but, again, just remember, commercial fire, it's 2.5 until proven otherwise. You know, that second line can be what? Same size or less if we determine it, or more if it's still undergunned at that point. Master streams. Again, these are things for us to be thinking of. Our tactics in that, I will tell you, if we roll up to a strip mall fire, expect to see a deck gun go into play, expect to see that ladder get used from an undermount position to be able to flow water on this fire. It is not worth not sending any one of you guys home for some water in that comes out of the ground and is accessible all day long. That's just the plain and simple of it. But those are things that we have to practice on. Those are things that we have to understand. What are our limitations of the ladder? Can we flow a full amount with people in the bucket at a negative rate? Those are things we have to research in that. I've got notes and stuff to go back and double check. Master streams, how proficient are we with getting? That gun should be pretty dang quick, right? Get that opened up. We put that into our testing and stuff that we do biannually. The blitz nozzle. How familiar are we with that? How proficient are we with getting that into play? That'd be a great one, especially a big box store, right? Take that inside the front door and let it eat. One person can monitor that nozzle once it's up and running, or none. I mean, it can sit there and run, but we have to know how to use it. We have to be able to set it up, taking out your ceiling grids and everything else.
Especially with metal deck roof, that's the only way you're gonna put it down.
Yeah.
Just from showing underneath.
So there again, as you know, I went to Florida and that for Chief Norman's training. As he puts it, he goes, any water applied from above is for PR. The water has got to come from underneath. You got to get the water into the space to be able to do the job that it needs to do. Now there again, obviously within question. We can reset fires and we can do a lot of stuff, which we've done with that overhead water. But to truly get at it, you got to get to the seat of the fire.
It's gotta get on the surface.
What's that?
I said absolutely, it has to get on the surface of what's burning.
Yeah. So overhead spaces, you know, these are those things too. You know, residential structures. How many times do we pop a hole in the ceiling in that in a residential structure? Should be doing it every time we go. Every fire we go, if we actually go to a fire, there should be holes inside the front door and every so often in that as we're moving through that structure. Commercial ceilings and drop ceilings, we obviously got to get above our head. You've got to know what it is. There's too many examples out there that bad stuff has happened. I mean, and locally in that too. Athletic club fire. You know, this fire had some avenues. Chief Schaefer and that's brought some up in the recent past. again, the information's there, we need to utilize it. And it is touching on the roof operations. So again, circumstances played into some of that. I don't know that this was their first line of attack, but it was noted in the report that their first option is they were up there working with cutter's edge saws, trying to get through that roof structure. I would imagine, and I don't have a definite, I can tell you ladder 4 out of Charlotte carries more than one of each of those saws. I would imagine ladder 24 is the same setup as the others, but again, not there, can't say from one standpoint or the other, but understanding roof operations are different, right? Residential structures, it's about that speed, it's about the ability to get up there, get your hole cut, get back off. Roof on commercial, it's gonna be a little more labor intensive. You're gonna have some more time frame that's up there, and we've got to understand the makeup that's down below us, right? The bar joist underneath. If that engine isn't getting water on that fire, that's not a place that we want to be. That steel starts expanding, it starts twisting, we start having bigger issues. So that's why still the coordination has to be there between that engine crew and the roof operations from that point.
You have to understand the amount of buildup on that roof too. I mean,
Yes.
some of the schools around here,
Yep,
the one,
Avon Middle School North
yeah,
is every bit of that thick.
that thick.
So, but again, what is that building done to help us in that fashion? If we had a roof fire, it's gonna suck. I mean, obviously, that's just gonna be a shitty day. They've built in the bulkheads in that, within that structure. You knock a lock off of it, you open up a 4x8 vent hole, on a hinge. Makes it real nice and simple from that, but, understanding that. They've put them in all the corridors and stuff, so they're in strategic places and locations, to assist us as we go along. The vestibule area, or the main lobby area, side glass in that on all the atrias and stuff. That can all be taken out. That's natural vent options from there too, just understanding that stuff. So again, I didn't go as in-depth into the policies and procedures. As you look through here, you know, you can start picking them out on your own, especially when we look at OGs as we're moving forward. You know, our commercial operations, they need to be looked at. What are our assignments gonna be? What are our positions in that gonna be? RIT was another one on this. There wasn't a designated RIT crew. Again, 2016. That's, you know, it's not like a long time ago. It's not as if it hasn't been talked about over and over again. What limited them at that point? Manpower. I mean, the incident commander said it. I am running out of people. I know I have people coming, but I am running out of people here. And that's one thing that we've got going for us. When we look at our staffing levels, we look at the mutual aid agreements that we have around us. It's pretty I don't want to say simple, but it's pretty straightforward that I could have 30 people on the scene in a very short period of time. On a fire like this, you're going to need all that and then some, right? We looked at the initial fire building. There was all those companies on the initial fire building. That wasn't even checking the other sides. Luckily, the firewalls and stuff that were there, brick walls, block walls, are going to keep it fairly contained. Again, that's nothing more than an oversized room and contents, other than the roof was burning. You know, something inside of it, it's just going to be a hot box. So, that's all I got. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Well, we had a similar situation, well, not really similar, but where we had a roof fire over here at Duke Energy.
Yep.
And when we left, I was at Station 3, when we left, you could see the glow. So, you know, it was like, man, this is a big deal. So when we get there, we go inside, start popping ceilings. I had nothing inside, nothing in between. And come to find out, even though it looked really big and nice and pretty, it ended up being, they had roofers there earlier in the day, and they had a wheelbarrow that the roofing stuff just ignited. I mean, that's all it was.
Yep.
But it looked impressive, and like you said earlier, pointed out, popping those tiles, I mean, we radioed, hey, we don't have anything inside.
And that's key information, right? As we move forward in that communication has got to be there from that standpoint too. You know, they passed along some info. One of the NIOSH recommendations or reports, getting that information passed along. What are your conditions inside? What's your heat conditions? What's your visibility? All those things, as we've talked about through trainings. You know, once you make that front door, get in there a little bit, give me a quick rundown of what we're looking at, what we have, because that's dictating where we're going and what those next steps are gonna be. We need to be looking at ventilation before we look at other things, you know, is that in the process, so.
Those pictures you had,
Yep.
are those post-incident, like with the gate and stuff? and the steel?
Yes, yeah, so that was all from the NIOSH investigations and stuff.
So, since there wasn't any lighting in the ceiling tiles, I guess I think you can have nobody, like, is that all from coming from the facade, or is that coming from?
So it's all coming essentially, so inside the structure, they called heavy gray smoke from that standpoint. How heavy or thick was that truly? Was visibility shitty? Probably. But on the flip side, that's not even discolored.
That's what I'm getting at, like, how can
You look at,
Those are paper
So-
posters.
what does paper burn at?
Yeah.
400 degrees, right? Paper will start igniting, self-igniting at 400 degrees. It's not shriveled. There's plastic on the walls. There's all these indicators in that, again, not there. Can't say for one side or the other. I can look at the pictures from the front of the building. Smoke conditions in that are still what?
They're still.
Top third of the door? Don't get me wrong, you can see, if you get a little closer, you can see that there's a smoke layer here. Again, what is that from though? Is that from volume or is that from pressure?
Pushing down from the top.
Pressure's pushing it down, but it's just filled up that space, which is now pushing it, you know, I mean, the volume in that can't take any more of it. It's got nowhere else to go. It's not the heat that's really pushing it. This is fairly lazy.
It's laminate now.
You know, I mean, there's not much flow or angriness to it, so. But yeah, no, that was my thing too, when I looked at it, and, you know, we talked about the structure. So your ceiling tiles in that, slightly discolored, but not really. This was the big one for me. So do not enter, this was put up after the fact, but these, here on this side, there's paper on the inside of these windows. There's clothes, there's boxes, there's all this stuff that's not affected or not touched. Again, we lost a firefighter in this structure that, what did he die of?
Just orientation.
Asphyxiation, right? Smoke inhalation. Why? Again, you could say training level, you could say all kinds of other things, you know. Is that a fire we'd be inside on?
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Every day, all day long, without question.
When they got the Charlie door open, was anybody able to stick their head in or a tick and see if they could see anything? Was there any talk of that at all?
So engine 39 ended up, that's what they said, so they actually made entry from the Charlie side to do their search. So they got assigned to do their search at that point, but they come in from the Charlie side. Yeah, it was open, I mean, it was open on both sides. Again, all the hose lines going here through the front door, as you can see in that other picture.
I mean, any talk of taking a line into there?
I don't know that there was, they had lines there,
If you
but
remember right,
again, the
didn't
fire.
he assign them the primary, if I remember right? Wasn't that like the?
Engine 39 got
on the
assigned to
back?
search,
Yeah,
yeah,
so they got
right.
assigned to search.
And they were back there initially to force entry, so I don't know that they had, whether they took their rig around or whether they just made their way back there.
Is there
But
any,
again, the fire was on the roof, you know, I mean,
technically, yeah.
so there was a little bit, like I said, it did come in a port on the Bravo Charlie side a little bit and burned on that back wall. What was there, I don't know, I didn't see anything that really, they talked about the line of duty, not necessarily the fire, from that perspective. So my guess is that it struck something there, as we've seen, either ran down a gas line or ran down a, you know, electrical chase or something to that nature and was burning in that back spot, but. Yeah,
It was more of a fire question. I didn't know if they had any sort of information about how much space there was between the drop ceiling and the deck, or pictures
Well, so here we can see that it's probably, they don't have that, but if you look at the facade, so again, your roof line in that's probably at this level. So, not a whole lot, I mean, I wouldn't think, you know, with less than 3 feet would be my guess, reading that building, but, because there again, before, from the overhead view, you had your wall here, and you had your wall here, so.
No.
This may be, that's the bracing for the awning, I was gonna say that may be a scupper there, but those would all be on the backside.
Another thing that could have really contributed a lot to the smoke was the volley ISO board that was under, in the layering.
Yeah,
Once that's
well,
done,
and the roofing material that was burning, from that point.
I mean, that's gonna produce a lot of smoke.
So yeah, it was, so there again, this is after the fact. I believe these are still all the fire marshal's postings and that are on there. They got a board up behind here. So these are all still intact. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, like I said, that was one of my biggest things, looking at it, you know, because you think of obviously somebody perishing in a fire, it's going to be the worst environment imaginable. I mean, that's what you know, you would assume, or that's where your mind goes. It is the worst environment imaginable, just with the dealing with the situation, but the fire itself was kind of interesting. Yeah, like I said, kind of picked this one. We've got a few of these in our area, just some things to think of, some food for thought. And again, you know, it's one of those, and I know I hammered on it quite a bit when I first took over with the shift in that, obviously, of reading our nozzles and connections, and you know, when we started off, we didn't have the best of success rates with that. I mean, just to be honest about it. Obviously, we've worked through it. It's been a while since we've gone back to it, but you know, it's those simple things. Those are those expectations that we have to be able to do it essentially in our sleep, because we're not going to be making cognitive thought. It's got to be reactive thought at that point, right? Relying on our training, relying on just muscle memory. Any other questions?